I am back here with our next speaker, Sarah Calick, nearby on the North Shore, not too far away from where I am here in Boston. And I am once again pleased to welcome her to the stage. Sarah is Executive Director of the Good Jobs Institute, whose mission is to help companies thrive by creating good jobs. She builds partnerships with companies looking to implement the good job strategy, which she'll share all about, and creates tools and resources to inspire and guide any organization that wants to transform from bad jobs to good jobs. I think it's fitting that she'll be joining right after Karen. And like I said before, Karen will appear back on stage for the Q&A session with Sarah. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic, Matt. Thank you so much. I am loving watching your moderation, and I am always thrilled to be able to speak with Karen, who has just such amazing experience and insights. You've got to read her book, Steady Work. She did not pay me for that. That is just a full-blown, fantastic book that you have to read. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you all over the world tonight. This is such an amazing, ambitious undertaking, which, of course, I would expect nothing less from the Lean Global Network and all of you amazing, committed people out there. Again, I'm Sarah. I'm the Executive Director of the Good Jobs Institute. As Matt said, we're based in Cambridge, Mass., and our mission is to help companies thrive by creating good jobs. Our work is based on the work of Zeynep Ton, who's a professor at MIT's Sloan School of Management. She wrote a great book in 2014 called The Good Job Strategy. Where is it? Right there. And really encourage you to read it. It's an excellent overview of her research in retail. So really excited to be talking with you about retail and good jobs and operational excellence today. So I am in Ipswich, Massachusetts. You are all, I think, all over the world. But I want to start us here. I don't know if anybody knows where this is, but this is in Michigan. This is one of Ford's car plants. And of course, he revolutionized the way that we make cars. He created the assembly line and was able to, create cars faster than anybody else before. He did great for car making, but not so great for jobs. So these were not great jobs. You kind of did the same thing over and over all day. If you saw something was wrong, you had no way to talk about it. You may not even be able to talk to the person next to you. You may not speak the same language. So, Ford is actually famous for saying this. Why is it that I always get the whole person when all I want is a good pair of hands? As you heard from Karen, this is so antithetical to anything in lean, but that was the way we made cars for a long time. Until, of course, Toyota came around, and they use a human-centered operating system, and they want your hands, but your heart and your mind and your eyes and your problem solving. And they have, of course, revolutionized both the way we make cars, but also the way that we think about work. And I'm really excited to say that there's a similar change happening in the service industry, in retail, hospitality, restaurants, call centers. We don't just need a pair of hands. We need your whole self to be ready, and we need these jobs to be good. Here in the United States, service jobs are the fastest growing, from healthcare to retail to restaurants. And as we are in the midst of a COVID pandemic, they are very hard to staff right now. So Matt mentioned Starbucks are closed. Same here where I live. Many retailers can't open because they can't staff. So we've got a work problem, we've got a good jobs problem, and Lean and the Good Job Strategy can be part of that solution. So we work with companies in the service sector who really want to offer better jobs because they know that that's how they're going to win with their customers. Many of them come to us because they're in what we call the vicious cycle. So it starts with operational problems. In retail, you've got stockouts and dirty stores and no help and all sorts of operational challenges. In restaurants, low food quality, inconsistent food quality, food waste. Call centers, long wait times, no resolution of your problems. That all leads to lower sales and profit, right? Your customers can't access the service and the products they want. So you've got a problem. You've got a big hole in your budget. You got to cut somewhere. And companies often cut their labor budget because it's big and it's juicy, and you can cut it really quickly and see the results right away. But the challenges that come from cutting that labor budget, you may not be able to see immediately, right? So you can blame challenges on other things besides that cut. And so you have lower investment in people, and you've got higher turnover and less training. And what we found is that then drives those operational problems, right? If you've got high turnover, it's harder to have great inventory. It's harder to have great, consistent food quality. And so you end up in this vicious cycle that hurts investors, customers, employees, managers, everybody. And at the heart of this is the assumption that people are cost to be minimized and not the beating heart of your organization. And of course, in service, they are the beating heart of your organization. So this vicious cycle, it's expensive. It's expensive for companies, but like I said, they don't always trace it back to cuts in investments in people. But it is expensive. We see financial challenges for retailers and other service sector groups. Less traffic, people are buying less, they're coming less often, less loyalty, right? Higher costs, shrink, turnover, overtime, safety, lower labor productivity, all go into the financial case. But also, really critically important, it's hard to be competitive long term when you're in this vicious cycle. When you have high turnover and you can't hire and you can't retain, it's really hard to differentiate yourself in a marketplace to offer fantastic customer service. And it's hard to adapt to all of obviously the last, 2 years have been cataclysmically challenging in terms of adaptation. But there's always changes in the business community, from new regulations to new technology to new consumer demands. And if you're in this vicious cycle, it's hard to adapt. And then, of course, it's really challenging sort of morally as business leaders when you can't offer good jobs and you can't keep people in your organization. So it's expensive for companies, but the vicious cycle and low investment in people and bad jobs are really, really costly for your workers too. There's a lot of research on the effect of low wages and unstable schedules on workers. At least here in the United States in the service sector, these jobs have often been marked by low wages and very unstable schedules. Um, it hits people's mental and physical health, right? So financial insecurity leads to higher heart disease, stroke, diabetes, poor maternal health, premature death, mental health issues, including a bandwidth tax equal to a loss of 13 IQ points if you're under financial stress. So you don't feel well physically or emotionally, and you can't meet your obligations. So again, sort of in a US context, it's hard to make rent. And so you're at risk of eviction, which is incredibly stressful. Um, Public transportation is costly, and a car is really costly. And a large percentage of Americans don't have $400 in case they have an emergency. And that's often what it costs if you pop a tire or you need to get something fixed on your car. So you may not be able to, just meet your obligations today. You might not be able to therefore get to work, right? It's hard to take care of children and, families and elderly. And of course, COVID has really shown a light on this here in the United States, where we do not have good elder or child care systems. And it means all of this sort of makes you really unstable in your life. And so it's hard to hold on to a job, hard to plan for the future. You're probably working multiple jobs, which means it might be hard for you to get to any of your jobs on time if another one's holding you back. You can sort of see how, when you're paying low wages and you've got low schedules in the service sector, your team members are also in a vicious cycle, right? Low pay, instability, inability to, get to work. They might get fired, but they're trying their best, but they don't have the resources to be able to get out of this. And I think for me, this slide is the saddest, right? I think we see this a lot in the service sector. Service work is hard because it often does pay low wages, has unstable schedules, but it's also really hard because many of these jobs are designed in a way that doesn't respect people's time, their knowledge, their judgment. It doesn't give them the time, the tools, the resources, the autonomy that they need to succeed, which means that every day they're failing in front of customers at work. And that's just incredibly demoralizing. And it means they can't thrive, and it means companies can't thrive either. And that's why it's so incredibly important for us to help companies get out of this vicious cycle, both for their own business, but also for millions of workers here in the US and around the world who are doing really essential work. So there are a lot of companies who either never were in this vicious cycle or who were able to get out of it. Costco, Trader Joe's, Quick Trip. Shout out to anybody who's still awake in Spain. I'm not sure you're still on, but Mercadona, the wonderful low-cost supermarket in Spain. These are, different countries selling different products. They have different customers, different ownership, but all have found a way to create real value for customers, employees, and investors. So what's the secret of some of these leading retailers? The secret is a little bit in what Toyota found. They all run a human-centered operating system. So they invest in people. And Jim Sinegal at Costco talks about this. He says, we invest in people both because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's good business. So they invest in people, and then you need a return on the investment. So they make a set of operational choices designed to leverage capable and motivated people so that they can contribute more, be more productive, be more motivated at work. And once you make those choices, you need really capable, motivated people. And so you invest more in people and you create a nice virtuous cycle, right? And this is opposed to an operating system that is designed assuming low ability, low motivation, high turnover, and lots of command and control. So they have again made a different set of operational choices while investing heavily in people. And that is really the good job strategy. And that's what I'm here to talk with you about today. The good job strategy identifies 4 operational choices that great service sector companies make with investment in people in the center. And when all of these combine, you can create really great value for your customers. They're satisfied and loyal. Your employees, they're motivated and capable, and your investors. You see higher productivity, stronger execution, higher sales, lower cost. There's a whole book about this. I think I have like 30 minutes. So I'm going to give you like a really quick view of what each of these choices look like. And then I'm going to talk you through one in-depth case study about Quest Diagnostics call centers, and then a quick one about a retailer, Sam's Club, and how they've been implementing the good job strategy. So you can sort of see these in action. But I encourage you to visit our website, goodjobsinstitute.org. We've got tons of free resources and tools and fun stuff there. And also just encourage, I'll make the lean connections as I go, but I think you're going to see a ton of connections to what Karen was talking about and what you guys have all been talking about all over the world all day and into the evening. So the first operational choice that great companies make, who are able to, again, offer great jobs, great customer satisfaction, and great returns for investors, is they focus and simplify. So Karen, this was one of your last questions, is sort of getting out the complexity in a lot of retail environments. The best companies that we've studied and worked with, they know why their customers come to them. They don't try to be everything to everyone. They make hard and strategic trade-offs about what to be good at and what to offer, and what not to be good at and what not to offer. And then they simplify, simplify, simplify their offerings, their operations, their reports, their tools, their supply chain, everything, with an eye to helping make sure that their frontline workers can be more productive and really better able to serve their customers. So what does this look like? A typical supermarket offers 40,000 products. Costco offers 4,000, Trader Joe's 3,000 or 4,000, Mercadona 8,000 or 9,000, right? So way fewer products. What does this mean? It means increased productivity, right? It's we've counted jams at Trader Joe's versus Whole Foods, and it's something like 40 versus 400, right? There's a lot of labor to stock 400 jams, and it's not all value add, right? So you can increase your productivity. Your teams know your products better. Go to Trader Joe's, go to Mercadona, ask them about something. I am going to guarantee you that they can give you a PhD treatise on what chip is going to be best for avocados and guacamole, because they only have 8 chips. They don't have 80. Right? So really well-versed teams who can be there for your customers. This is especially true for restaurants and cafes. As Karen noted, larger menus can mean more waste, complicated supply chains, more training, more prep time, less consistency. So during COVID, we've seen a lot of restaurants significantly reduce their menus, and they've seen customer satisfaction go up, and they've seen operational complexity go down, and their teams have been happier. So simplifying offering is one big thing in focus and simplify, and that can really reduce complexity and improve work. And then we also help companies think through a couple of questions and how they can simplify work further. So how can you reduce non-value add work? What's wasting people's time? What systems are duplicative? Where's their wasted movement? All of these sort of great lean questions. 2, how can you smooth work over time? In retail, in service, you often have really big customer peaks. So how can you move any non-customer facing work off of those peak times so you can really be there for customers? And then 3, how can you reduce last minute changes? We see this a lot, especially in retail, especially in sort of fashion retail when they're trying to respond to trends. A lot of last minute changes that can disorganize stores and disorganize teams. How can you reduce that? So who knows the answer to all of these questions best? Your teams. They know what wastes their time and frustrates their colleagues and their customers. So part of the good job strategy is really deeply engaging your team in identifying how to simplify work. It both drives better ideas and it also helps build trust. So Karen, you talked about this scientific method, coaching katas. There's lots of lean tools here that can help create a whole crew of observant work problem solvers. And that's incredibly important here in the good job strategy. Often the first step is just really making sure that you are focused in your strategy and then that you're simplifying. So the next operational choice that good jobs companies make is standardize and empower. And again, Karen, you talked quite a bit about standardized work. So again, very much a lean concept here. Sometimes we'll go into a retailer or a restaurant and we'll see, a 300-page book of SOPs. They are beautiful. Someone's worked really hard on them and no one in that store has read them, right? Maybe they've read 5, maybe they've got a couple, but often companies that are in a vicious cycle, people aren't even really given any training. They're just thrown out onto the floor. They're learning by doing. They're learning through tribal knowledge. And those SOPs, they're just not alive in store. Other times we do work with companies that don't really have any standards, leaving their companies to just do things however they learned or however they think works best, which is really bad for consistency. So the best companies standardize the work that would most benefit from standardization and efficiency and consistency, but at the same time, they're empowering their employees to improve those standards and to help solve customer problems and to drive continuous improvement. So, what does that look like in terms of empowerment? We work with the National Association of Convenience Stores, NACS, and several of their members have a button on their point of sale, on their cash register, that says, "Get it right" or "Delight the guest." And that empowers their teams to, if there's a problem, delight the guest right there. Don't have to call corporate, don't have to talk to your manager. So let's say, a kid has an ice cream cone, walks out of the store, drops it. You can say, "I'm going to delight you. You go get yourself another one," right? If there's a long line in a convenience store, which again, the mornings, you got to get in and out of there. And one of your regular customers is 8 customers back with their, regular black cup of coffee. You can say, "Hey, Tanya, I gotcha." Delight the customer button, get her out of there quickly and make a customer for life. So there's lots of ways to empower your teams. It's critically important to do both. Standardize with team input, those things that can most benefit from consistency and efficiency, and then really empower your teams to solve customer problems and to improve the way that they work. The next operational choice is cross-train. So many companies in the vicious cycle, they don't offer any training at all. And, again, like I said, they can be so far behind in hiring that they're just throwing people on the floor first day. But the very best companies not only train people carefully, but they also cross-train so that their teams are able to be flexible and productive at all the time. So if there's a long line, someone who is stocking can jump up to the cash and knock that line down. Or if there's a big order comes in, people can help stock. Lots of flexibility here. So at Mercadona, cleaners are cross-trained to be cashiers and vice versa, right? Always want to be there for customers and always want to make sure that you're doing that non-customer facing work that allows you to be there for the customer. The last choice is last for a reason, and it's operate with Slack. So once you have simplified to reduce non-value add work, standardized so you know how long things should take, created flexibility with empowerment and cross-training, then you can operate with Slack. So many companies try to understaff to save money. Good jobs companies staff higher than the expected workload, so they have time to complete their tasks, engage customers, and make sure that their teams can be part of continuous improvement. So this one is really important. It can sound expensive, but again, once you've gone through this good job strategy process, you've got this fantastic team and you can staff above workload and they can always be productive, because I have never gone to a back room of a retailer or restaurant that couldn't use some work. There's always so much going on and so many things customer and non-customer facing that your teams can do. And finally, in the middle is invest in people. So we have an employee pyramid that's on our website. I encourage you to check it out, that looks at basic and higher needs. So investing in people means you've got to meet those basic needs. So pay, benefits, stable schedules, career paths, safety, security. Meet those, but then also have really rigorous hiring, training, performance management, career pathing, so that you are, hiring the right people for your roles, training them with trainers who are prepared, hands-on, ready to really be resources, that you're giving them performance feedback all the time so they know how they're doing and they're growing at work, and that you're really committed to promotion from within. That's key for us in service and in retail. We want to see companies that have such great hiring and training and development that 100% of their managers, their field managers, are all promoted from within because they believe in their people and they believe in growing careers. So all of this comes together to create the good job strategy. And I showed some of those companies: Costco, Trader Joe's, Quick Trip. My colleague Zainab studied them, 10 plus years ago, and they were the very best then. When I talked about sort of competitive advantages a few slides ago, 10 years on, they are still the best, right? Costco, Trader Joe's, Quick Trip, they're still outperforming their peers significantly, and they're still doing incredibly well in, again, a radically different environment. The retail environment changes so quickly. So that's the good job strategy. I mentioned a lot of retail, some restaurant examples here. I wanted to go deep in on a call center example. Call centers are, of course, huge in service. And Quest Diagnostics has gone through a good jobs strategy implementation and really wanted to share that with you. So many of you here in the US might know Quest very well right now because they do a lot of COVID testing. So again, really essential work in all of their labs across the United States. In support of all of those medical providers and patients, Quest operates call centers. So at the time of our study, which was 4 years ago now, I think, they were taking in 55,000 calls a day, 30% outbound to share urgent results with providers, and then 70% inbound, requests for results, additional tests, technical support, patient questions, that kind of thing. So that's the environment that we're in. Again, this is from, we studied them 4 years ago, and we continue to keep in touch with them. With COVID, I'm sure that all of these numbers have been blown out of the water, but just to center you both in place and space. So in 2013, Quest decided to consolidate 20 regional customer support centers, that's what they call their call centers, into 2 centralized national support center locations. So 20 regional down to 2 call centers in Lenexa, Kansas, and Tampa, Florida. And then they had about 250 remote reps. So they were hoping that this would, create a lot of efficiency and a lot of great teamwork, but there were some initial challenges. So they thought reps might move to Lenexa and Tampa, and instead they had a rapid loss of experienced reps. They had really low turnover, and it got a lot higher. They had also been co-located in the testing laboratories, and that created both sort of this sense of medical knowledge, but also the sense of where you belong, right? When you're in a Quest facility, you realize all these tests going out every day have a patient behind them. And then they had some challenges with their computer systems, sort of making them all compatible with each other. And, within a year or two, the consolidation started to create pretty significant performance issues for them. So in terms of employee outcomes, their turnover more than tripled. And this is a medical call center, right? There's a lot of technical stuff going on here. You really need that long-term expertise. Absenteeism rose to 12.4%, and 80% of their training was spent on onboarding, right? So really not a lot of investment in further training and career building for their teams. Customer outcomes were not good. Frequent customer complaints, unanswered calls, frequent call transfers from untrained reps who couldn't answer the questions. And the business outcomes were starting to be really challenging. So an estimated $10.5 million in annual turnover costs. And turnover in call center environments can be very high, the cost of turnover, because there's often a lot of training and sometimes in other industries, licensing fees. And then the sales teams were unable to close new accounts because of poor service. And they were getting some calls of people saying, we're going to leave because we can't get good service, right? So this was becoming a real existential threat for all of Quest. These call centers, they were trapped in that classic vicious cycle. So you can see this quote from the supervisor, but they were so focused on just getting to the next call and instead of thinking about how can I better assist this caller, that they just couldn't get out of their own way, and they couldn't think about a better way to do things. But things were really coming to a crisis. So in 2015, they brought in new management, and they built a case for change, emphasizing different elements to achieve buy-in from stakeholders. So they made a financial case. They were looking at the cost of turnover and that foregone revenue from the loss of existing accounts or new sales. They were looking at a competitive case, really competitive to hire and retain talent in Lenexa, Kansas. It's the call center like Mecca of the United States, so that you can always just work in another call center down the road. And there's big competition to win and retain accounts, and they were not winning. And then a moral case, really a strong case for a better work environment and greater fairness in pay. So they made this urgent case for why they needed to change, and a real clear, compelling vision for a workplace defined by high standards and operational excellence. So really sort of got to rally people around what different could look like, which was really exciting. And you can see some of these quotes. This was the first time I felt like we had a clear vision of an expectation set for where we needed to go and what we needed to do. All right, so where to begin when you're in a vicious cycle? So when figuring out where to start, Quest realized that the first step was they needed to stabilize their labor force by raising wages, but also raising expectations. So step one, they raised wages. And this is often the first step for companies in a vicious cycle. We work with companies that are paying $8, $9, $10 an hour. That's just not competitive. Even if it is market rate. Again, service industry often is marked by low wages. So the market is broken, right? And you can't depend on that. So they raised wages. This was, again, 2015. They increased their starting wage from 13 to 14. They increased existing staff wages by 2% to try to avoid too much compression. And then they put in a really great career path that had pay increases at 3, 6, and 12 months. So not huge, but you knew over the course of the year that you were going to see increases in your pay. And also they had a continued roadmap for additional promotions and additional training after that first year. Pay really matters, but so does growth. And so does, having a new title and having new responsibilities and building a career. So you could see they had a technical career path. They had supervisory career paths. They wanted to build different career paths for folks and make them very clear so you knew where you could go when you joined them. So they raised wages and they put in this great career pathing. But then they also wanted to raise expectations, both Quest's expectations of their employees, but also their employees' expectations of Quest. So what does this mean? They raised Quest's expectations of employees. They put in a stricter attendance policy and new performance management system that had a broader set of metrics. So I think sort of the big metric that mattered was like time to answer call, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing great service on that call. So they made better metrics so people really understood what mattered. And they also said, you guys have to be more consistently coming to work, and people clapped, right? If you're one of the great performers who's there every day, it's incredibly frustrating to have a group of people who are not held accountable. So this raised the bar for everyone. But then they also said, we want to give you more. We want to raise your expectations of us. We're going to improve our onboarding. They redesigned their hiring process to better reflect the characteristics of successful hires, and they had a more structured approach to training. So smaller training classes, shorter, and more time actually nesting, which means sort of getting on with an experienced rep and experiencing calls, which was really important and really helpful for new trainees. And they also put in more support roles to ease the burden on reps and supervisors. So more subject matter expertise, workforce management, dedicated trainers, really trying to support people more. That was their first step. That was sort of how they were starting to stabilize people. But then, so these were their investments in people at that center of the good job strategy. Then they went to look at some of their operational choices. Focus and simplify. That was first, and that really helped fuel a lot of those investments in people. So they started listening to their calls, and they started asking their customers, what calls are good? What frustrate you? What do you want from us, right? And they heard from their customers, you know what? If you're just sending normal results, we don't want to call. Just fax it, email it. Like there's other ways you can get us this. And so they were able to actually decrease their call volume a significant amount. So you can see here, 7% for inbound, 16% for outbound, a huge amount. They had better, self-service, better routing, all sorts of things that just took a lot of volume and non-value add work out of the system that their customers didn't want. And that savings, again, helped fuel some of those investments in people. And then they wanted to get to standardization and empowerment, and they did it in this really cool way. They created model pods to drive employee engagement and to help those employees identify high leverage improvement opportunities. So they work in pods of about 15 call center reps and a supervisor. So they sort of created these model pods, and they had quality management teams come and help teach them how to problem solve. So they did a lot of sort of the 8 wastes and that kind of thing. They created daily huddles and a huddle board, and started to just have them observe their work and identify ways to improve it. They had a big, fun central project board here as the model pods expanded. These are some of the huddle boards, which were personalized for each pod. This is all going to sort of, I think, be familiar in the lean world. So some great quality management by team that started to create really fantastic ideas for better service and for better productivity. We have a whole case on this. By the way, it's on the MIT Sloan website. So please, it's free, and want you to check it out. And this is, again, quick highlights before we get into questions. But about a year into this transformation, they launched a frontline idea card to create an even more participatory process to assess and implement employee ideas. You can see their fix here, and then they would have a process every Friday during their huddle to go through these ideas and categorize them and see which ones would have the biggest impact and which ones were easiest to implement. And 1,500 ideas came in less than a year, and 1,000 plus were implemented. And just wanted to show you a few of these ideas because I love them so much. This call center rep here is in front of a specimen container board. So what is that? If you're a patient at Quest, you may have to bring a specimen to one of their testing centers. And so they may send you in the mail some kind of container. And so you may call the call center and say, I got this. I do not know what I'm supposed to do with this. Now, these call center reps were getting these calls about people talking about some kind of container, and they didn't have it in front of them. And it's really hard to explain how you open this, how you use this if you don't have it in front of them. So he created this awesome thing with all of the different specimen containers. And so you can just pop up, grab the number that your caller is asking about, and physically be able to touch it, work through it with them. Awesome, right? Somebody at like Quest, corporate isn't going to think that you need this because it's such an important part of the day-to-day for him, and something only he can see, and such a fantastic idea. So I love this. Another thing that, I always would just assume there was a system for this, but if you chose, I speak Spanish and you wanted to get a bilingual representative, your phone call would be routed to that bilingual rep, but the bilingual rep didn't know if your call was in Spanish or in English. And so they would have to say, hello, hola, take an average of 23 seconds to figure it out. And so one of the reps recommended there just be a whisper that would say Spanish if the person wanted to speak Spanish. Saved, again, 23 seconds per bilingual call, great cost savings. So all of these added up, I think, to $1.3 million run rate savings. Awesome ideas, again, driven by these fantastic reps. And that empowerment to create sort of better standards and better ideas was a really powerful impetus to improve operations. And these are all fun quotes, but you listen to the customer service reps because they're the truth. The only way, they know what's going on, and it's our job to support them and make their jobs easier. So Karen, you talked about sort of going to the work and listening to and really deeply engaging workers. Quest did a phenomenal job of this. So after 18 months, Quest was able to improve performance across the board. So employee outcomes, remember, they had tripled their turnover. Their voluntary attrition went from 34% to 16%. Unplanned absenteeism down from 12% to 4%. This one is great. Time that the trainers could spend, building skills for their teams instead of new training went from 20% of their time to 58%. Probably my favorite, their promotion rate went from 9% to 22%. People were staying, they were building careers, they were, able to grow at Quest, which is so awesome. Great customer outcomes. 60-second answer rate went from 50% to 70%. Call transfer rate went from 12 to 9, right? You want that to go down. You want your problem solved by that first person. Solve rate from 94% to 96%. And the business outcomes were really strong too. 1.3 million in annualized run rate savings, as I mentioned, a decrease in live call volume, cutting out those calls our customers didn't want, and a real resolution of those sales and account management issues that had been a very big worry for Quest. So really fantastic case study of how they invested in people and then made a set of operational choices, from simplifying the work to really creating new standards and new empowerment vehicles and tons of new ideas from their teams to create a much much better work environment and a much better outcome for their customers, and therefore great business outcomes for Quest. I am almost done, and then I think we're going to jump to questions. Just wanted to give you a quick insight into Sam's Club as well in the retail space. They have been going through a good jobs implementation for the last couple of years. And they also started with investment in people. So they started by giving much higher wages for key roles. These are department heads, butchers, cake decorators, the ones who their members are most often meeting with and talking with, and who also have a lot to do with the development of their teams. They raised their wages $5 to $7 per hour from a base of about 15. So people went from making $15 an hour to making $22 an hour. I can't tell you how transformational this is for someone. And we met some of their team and they said, this meant freedom, and they were crying and they were, calling their spouses, and this was a huge deal. So a very significant investment in people. They also invested in more consistent and predictable schedules and more full-time workers because they really wanted people to make their careers at Sam's. So they made some big investments, but then they simplified and they standardized the work in a way to help pay for that, but also to improve that work, to drive productivity and to drive customer service. So if you talk about focus and simplify, they reduced their product variety by 25%. They're a warehouse model, but they had a lot of SKU proliferation. They reduced things, and actually people came up to them and said, wow, you're carrying so much more stuff. You think customers want all the choices in the world, but it can actually be really hard to figure out when you have too many choices. I don't know, again, how many Starbucks combinations there are, but a lot of choices, right? So this actually helped their customers see and make better choices. They also chose to simplify work by removing photo centers. They removed a whole chunk of their work and said, this is not really why our customers are coming to us. We're not going to focus on this. Then they did a lot of simplifying of the stocking process, which, as you can imagine, in a warehouse environment is a lot of the time spent by staff. So they made a lot of small changes in layout, in the process. They became a little bit more palette driven so that they could save time here and simplify that process for their teams so their teams could be more available for their customers. And then they did some standardizing. They standardized their tire buying process to reduce the time that it took to get their customers to the right answer for tires. And they made real investments in technology that helped their teams, to help empower their teams to be there for their customers. So they created something called Ask Sam's on a handheld device. It's getting late over here. It's 8:23. And that allowed, wherever you were in the store, if a customer had a question, you could find an item, you could find a team member. It just allowed you to be a better resource for the customer, which was fantastic for team members and associates, so they could really shine in front of customers, and great for customers so that they could get the help that they needed. Sam's is still on their journey. And in fact, they just announced in September that they'll be paying all of their associates $15 starting wage and above. So that's really exciting. But they've seen some great results after a couple of years. So those key roles where they really invested saw turnover decreases as high as 49%. Their net sales jumped 1.2%. So you can offer less, but still sell more, which is great. Strong same-store sales growth. And competitively, this is so important for a membership-based organization like Sam's. They saw more new members and higher member retention rates. And they also had a better ability to adapt during COVID. So that differentiation, that adaptability was really there for them. And again, the moral case of really better jobs has been very strong. So that is what the good job strategy looks like in retail and call centers and in retail. I would love to, I think, turn it back over to Matt and maybe bring on Karen and see what questions we might have.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And welcome back, Karen.
Absolutely.
We had a lot of questions come in during your presentation, Sarah. We have about 5 minutes or so. I'll start off with one here from Alfredo here. He asks, good jobs requires respect for people and humanity. Unfortunately, this seems to be the last of concerns up on the corporate ladder. In your opinion, is there any chance this might change anytime soon at a large scale?
Alfredo, great question. And absolutely, you got to have respect for people and really believe in people. And we do see this changing. So, one of the things that is really encouraging is when companies do promote from within, your CEO may be somebody who started as a cashier, 20 years before, 30 years before. So, I think when you really start and you do the work, you have a lot of respect for the work. And I also, yeah, so I think we're seeing some changes, and I also think it's going to take a lot more carrots and sticks to move business leaders. We need better business education. We need more investors asking more questions of companies. We need more company leaders asking questions of each other.
Karen, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm so passionate about the subject. Oh, Sarah, it's such a competitive advantage. There's so many opportunities out there right now. You drive down the road and you see sign after sign after sign. We're hiring, we're hiring, we're hiring. And they're hiring at $11 an hour, $15 an hour, whatever the number, right? It's one component of a total strategy for an organization to really think about how to really provide a respectful environment. So I am so excited for what your organization is doing, and you marry that up with really thinking, lean thinking, and practice of how to improve how work is done for people. There's no stopping different organizations. It is the competitive advantage that people are seeking. They just don't realize it's right in front of them. It's just so sorry. I'm very passionate about this subject. Can you tell?
Hear, hear.
Really important.
Sarah, in the retail environment, there's this Goliath called Amazon, and retail stores struggle to compete. Amazon has infinite variety and 2-hour or 2-day delivery, so almost impossible to compete on convenience. And so how can they better compete with a company like Amazon, and what do Good Jobs have to offer?
Great question. Service, right? You can compete on service, on expertise. So Mudbay is a pet retailer in the Pacific Northwest here in the US, and they do consultative selling. So they sell to pet owners who have dogs and cats. They're pretty focused. And they want their teams to be really knowledgeable, because here in the US, we are obsessed with our dogs and cats. And, totally obsessed. And it's, they want to be able to offer what's the right nutrition, how can I be exercising my pet, how can I be making sure that my pet is living the healthiest life. If you're selling, sporting goods, you want somebody who's, coaching the baseball team to be helping your kid pick their glove, right? There's so much competitive advantage for brick and mortar retailers in creating this experiential. Ulta, Sephora, right? The makeup places, you can't try makeup on at Amazon, right? So much competitive advantage. And we just have to really tap into the rich, amazing spirit of people who can deliver that service.
I think we have time for one more question before we move on to our next speakers. Peter asks, can the Good Job strategy be integrated into current DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, especially for the most marginalized?
I love that question. So we have some research on our website about race and gender in retail and restaurants, and you will not be surprised that women and people of color are paid less, have more unstable schedules, and have worse career paths and career trajectories in all of these service sectors. So absolutely. I think when we work with a company, we look at, we do a wage assessment, which can be disaggregated by race and gender, lots of ways to bring DEI into the conversation, both in terms of meeting basic needs, but also, again, in terms of respect for people.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks, Karen, for joining us late at night here on the East Coast. Really wonderful to see you at the Lean Global Connection. Thank you.